questions. So if you are watching the replay, you can go ahead and put questions into the comments, or you can also reach out to the Rising Stars Foundation at support@risingstarsfoundation.org. So the Rising Stars Foundation, we are promoting the, every child being able to fulfill their potential by helping you to bring Montessori techniques and tools into your home in a very easy, attainable, affordable way. The 3-period lesson is one of the ways that you can do that. First off, it's completely free. So no matter what tools you have, what curriculum you're using, this is an easy to use, very simple but effective gap preventer that is going to help you to ensure that on a daily basis, your child is understanding the materials and the concepts with which they are working. And it's going to help to eliminate stress with math, with language arts, with any subject that you are teaching. And hello in Egypt. That is awesome. What time is it in Egypt? You are a dedicated educator, because I imagine that, is it not too late in the evening? So eliminating stress is really important. We're going to take a little bit more, a look at that. And the 3-period lesson is, as I mentioned, a simple but effective gap preventer that we can use for introducing anything new, whether it's a simple geometric shape like a hexagon or a more advanced pre-algebra concept. Now, the 3-period lesson, if you were to Google that, you're going to see a ton come up about the Montessori method and Dr. Maria Montessori, but it was actually developed by Edouard Seguin, who is a French physician who was working with kids with cognitive disabilities around the same time that Maria Montessori was, a little before her. And Dr. Montessori, she actually built on his work and developed the 3-period lesson that we have come to know and love in the Montessori method. But I do think it's important to note that, she was looking around her at the people who were also taking interest in people with cognitive and physical delays and saying, I think they're capable of so much more. What can we do to advance their development? And then, of course, the techniques that she developed and were developmentally appropriate for both cognitive as well as physical development, those are beneficial not just for students with special needs, but um, also students of all abilities. So if you have gifted, twice gifted, that combination of gifted and special needs, of average abilities, the 3-period lesson and all Montessori techniques are going to help you to help your child fulfill their potential. Okay, and like all of the other things in Montessori, the 3-period lesson is a very active, interactive, holistic learning technique where the child is going to be absorbing not just through language, but through hands-on discovery and exploration. And this does absolutely work with all subjects, not just Oh, so if you would like the PowerPoint to be available afterwards, we can make that available to you. We can send out an email with the link for that. Thank you for asking. And on the subjects, it can be used for not just your academic subjects, but yes, the practical life and grace and courtesy things as well. So really the 3 period lesson, and not just in your homeschooling, but this is something you can incorporate into your parenting and interacting with your child in general. And what's great about Montessori, and specifically the 3 period lesson, is that it's going to empower your child to experience whatever that is, the concept, the material, the vocabulary, the principle, and in incremental steps. And along the way, be able to get success with that level of knowledge and be set up for success in that next level. Frustration often comes in when we move our child too quickly. And so the 3 period lesson is going to help prevent that. It's actually a common mistake that happens in education is moving a child too quickly before they're ready to get to that next step. And then they end up frustrated, you end up frustrated, and no one is happy. I have to say that was one of the things before I had switched into using Schiller Learning Montessori based curriculum. Oh gosh, that was back in 2004 with my older kids. That's when I discovered it. Before then, I was doing Montessori homeschooling on my own, and then found it took a lot of time and went with some other things. But that personalized approach to the repetition and progression just helped to eliminate frustration for everyone. And it was just this literal overnight difference. So that was really nice. Okay, so the 3 period lesson, there are 3 stages as indicated by the name. And those are, the first period is a naming period. And that is when your child is going to be uh, introduced to an item. The second, and we're going to go through each one more in depth, is when they are then able to recognize and associate that name that you've assigned in that first period with the object. And then the third is recall. So super simple. No matter what discipline you want to apply this to, you are going to be able to do that. And then at the end of the third period, the child is going to be confident and secure using the new skills that they have acquired. So let's take a look in more detail at each of those 3 periods to be able to understand how each period builds upon the previous, as your child is going to learn, absorb, consolidate, and then be able to apply new information and new skills, regardless of what type of learner that they are. And again, the benefits of the 3 period lesson is that it's going to eliminate stress. It's going to eliminate lectures that tend to turn a child off from learning. Kids of all ages, but especially, preschool, elementary, they want to interact. I mean, we all learn best by doing, but it's really crucial. And it's just not developmentally appropriate to have that lecture, or something that it can also be referred to would be math-splaining if you're talking about math, or mansplaining. I know that can be considered a an offensive term sometimes, but mansplaining, you all know what that means. When something is explained ad nauseum, kids don't want to listen to us tell them about everything. They want to experience it. The 3-period lesson is going to ensure that we avoid those lectures that turn them off. It's going to promote self-discovery and that child-led learning. And it's going to enable you to more teach as opposed to correcting your child's mistakes for them. Uh, we don't want to do that because it actually can impair the quickness and effectiveness of their learning. And this is all going to help us to accomplish the following the child. That's a phrase that you'll see if you're new to Montessori homeschooling. This is a common tagline to the Montessori method: follow the child. And Dr. Montessori points out to us that, the child, they're going to show us what they need to do, what they need to develop in themselves, what areas they need to be challenged in. And the aim of the child is to persevere in their work with an object. And it's not to, quote, learn, but they're drawn to it by the needs of their inner life. And we want to be sure to recognize that and develop it. The length of each period of the 3-period lesson is going to vary greatly from child to child because each child's needs, where they're starting off with that beginning knowledge, the way in which they learn is different. And one lesson may take a child 5 minutes to do, it could take another 15 minutes. And so the length of each period is going to vary greatly from child to child. Some may speed through all 3 periods in just a couple of minutes, or maybe they'll need to spend some days on that second period before they are ready or the third. The second period does tend to be the one that takes the longest, and there's a lot of opportunity for discovery and creativity within that. But with the Montessori approach, teaching always moves at the child's pace, and the 3-period lesson is no exception. So the first period, of course, is that naming period. And naming is the desired target of the lesson. In Montessori, generally, we limit introducing new objects to 3 or 4 at a time. 3 is really the most common. But again, that depends on your child and their abilities. You want to be sure to use correct terms, that nomenclature, and you can include facts, but generally at the naming period, we want to use simple language and concrete materials. And so in the example where we're introducing numbers to a young child with some math manipulatives, say, unit cubes like we have on the screen here, and the Montessori materials for place value are color coded. And that's why the units on the screen here are green. And so we can show the child, this is 1. And we're just telling them as we are showing them and pointing to that object. This is 1. This is 2. This is 3. And you can pause at each of those and give the child an opportunity to explore whatever that object or material is. They can pick it up if they'd like. They can count the sides. They can compare push the columns or the rows of blocks together to see exactly what 1 versus 2 versus 3, how they are measuring up. They can go ahead and stop and pause and count each one of those. However your child wants to explore that material, give them the opportunity to do that. And as you know, repetition really is key in language development, especially with young children. Uh, and so you want to be sure to speak slowly, enunciate, and repeat with each of those. This again is that initial stage of the 3-period lesson. And from there, we can, give repetition to get that closure. But again, it's just a simple naming period. Now, period 2 is going to consist of the identification when the child is able to show you. So in the example of starting with numbers, we're going to start with the last example that we had given in the last period. That's one of the little tips that's going to help you apply this 3-period lesson to anything, whether it's science, history, the parts of a flower. Start with the last example. So in this case, the last number that we had introduced was 3. So we can go ahead and move those materials around so they're not in the exact order, but then go ahead and point to the row or the column of 3 objects, whether it's those unit cubes or you swap them out for some other objects. It is good to have variety in your practice. And then point to the 3. Oh, excuse me. No, you're not pointing. You're asking the child to point. I'm jumping ahead to the next period. So ask your child, can you show me 3? Can you show me 1? Can you show me 2? Don't do it in order. Start with the last example and then give some variety in your practice. In the case of introducing numbers, you could, if they have a collection of toys, can you bring me 2 dolls? Can you bring me 3 of the Matchbox cars? Can you show me 1 book? So they can see that that same quantity applies across any object, or if it's geometric shapes. And here's an opportunity to practice both numerical quantities as well as shapes. You can ask them, can you show me 3 circles or 2 squares, 1 triangle? So again, you get the idea, variety, practice, repetition. Once you see that your child is able to do it very quickly, without hesitation, without error, then you know that they are ready to move to that next period. And you want them to get closure, which means they get it and they're ready to move on. You don't want them to get frustrated with boredom. So as soon as you see that, okay, they've mastered this skill that we're doing, move on to that next period. Okay, there we go. Alrighty, the 3rd period is the recall period, and this is when the child will now have the understanding and the vocabulary to be able to verbalize that back to you. Again, whether it's that simple geometric shape or a number or a more advanced concept. And just like when we were transitioning from the first to the second period, we want to start with the last example. And so if we had last asked about, can you show me 2? Then you'll want to, now, as I started off explaining in the last one, now you are pointing to, in this case, the 2 and asking your child, what is this? Now, You only want to begin the third period when the child is confident with the language, the concept of the previous two periods. This is where that careful observation is coming in, observing, following the child. Okay, another important note about the third period is that this period is reserved for verbal children or, for kids who are able to say the words that they've been learning. Uh, if they get the answer wrong, the teacher does not correct them. They simply, affirm what the child has shown them. In the example of, um, if they were to point to one of the apples, you could say, that is one apple. You're not going to tell them that they were wrong. So you can say, that is one apple. I like to eat one apple at a time. Can you show me two apples? And again, you're just going back to the previous period, and you can also use the Socratic method. Okay, so what is this? Pointing at the two, hopefully they're going to say two. Then again, not necessarily going in order, you can mix that up and going to either one or two. What is this? What is it this? Yes, and so correct pronunciation, if your child is struggling with pronouncing certain words, that is okay. That's something that you can continue to work on. So if you have a nonverbal child, you want to just skip asking them to verbalize that word. If you've got a child who's struggling with pronunciation of words, have them go ahead and say it. And then you can affirm what they have said. And, if, for example, they're saying free instead of three, you can say, yes, that is three. Say with me, three. So you're giving the example of the correct pronunciation and then inviting the child to repeat that again with you. We do have some tips, by the way, on some things that you can do to help your child that is struggling with making letter sounds. It's in our language arts curriculum. And we do also give them, there's a replay from one of the sessions last week that is going to be on the YouTube channel this week, and you'll be able to, see in depth what those suggestions are. Okay, now, what are some of the mistakes that happen? Oh, I'm sorry. That's the what could go wrong is the next slide there. So mistakes. How should we respond when our child makes a mistake? This is a really important thing. You want to think about this prior to working with your child and have strategies that are going to help your child develop a growth as opposed to a fixed mindset. How we as home educators respond when our child makes a mistake can impact the growth mindset that they develop, not just for academics, but for life, and will affect the kind of relationship that they have with us, their peers, and maybe eventually their spouse as well. So no pressure, but how you respond to your child making a mistake is really important in the outlook that they develop on life and whether or not they're comfortable with making mistakes and being able to grow from them. We all make mistakes in all areas of life. Mistakes are an opportunity for learning. They're an opportunity for growth. When we make a mistake, it's an opportunity to be able to spot, okay, what is my stumbling block? What's causing this error to happen? How can I do something differently next time and get to that next level? Now, one of the things that you want to avoid when your child makes a mistake is correcting. Now, that's not to say that we just let the mistake go by and have them think that this is something that's true. Um, I am the ninth of 10 children. And funny thing, one of my older brothers, who was pretty close to me in age, used to enjoy telling me things that were just absolutely crazy wrong. And there were some of those things that I did not realize were not the case until I was a young adult. So we definitely don't want our child to, you know, go uncorrected, but the way we go about that. So you're not going to correct the mistake for them. You can do a couple of things. One is to go back to the first period and reintroduce that as if for the very first time, not conveying any frustration with our tone of voice or with our facial expressions or with our body language, because kids are very perceptive and tuned in to our disapproval. And what happens when we get stressed out looking, disapproval, disgust, and we never intend to look disgusted to our child, but it can, and it's really discouraging. And what ends up happening is it immediately causes their stress hormones to rise, which interferes with their cognitive processing and ability to store that information. Excuse me, just thank you. Their stress hormones rise and it interferes with the cognitive processing as well as storage of information. So, right away, as soon as your child is stressed out in learning, it's going to make their learning less effective. In that case, it's beneficial to just pivot to something else and do a reset. If you see your child getting stressed, a physical activity break can be great because it can help them to, get rid of those stress hormones and be able to refocus. It doesn't have to be a long physical break either, by the way. So avoid the tone of voice, the body language, the facial expressions, and just keep it neutral. We're presenting information in ways that our child is going to be able to absorb that. And it's simply going to vary what the frequency of that introduction and practice is going to be. Okay, you don't want to go ahead and lecture, explain everything. Go back to that first period, go on to that the second period where you're interacting with physical materials, you're learning by doing, and then um, you know, go with competency and closure as the goal for every lesson. We're actually going to a little bit later take a look at the three outcomes for that can happen in a lesson and how to handle those. So when your child makes a mistake, no problem, simply go back to a previous stage in the 3-period lesson. Make sure you're learning by doing that multisensory exploration and ensuring that your child is getting competency and closure at their own pace. Just another note about when we correct, tell the child that's wrong and tell them what the correct answer is. When we repeatedly do that, children are very prone to losing interest and being reluctant to try it again. And so, that's one of the reasons that, we don't want to do that. Okay. Now, these periods, as I mentioned, don't necessarily happen in a single session. One of the things that you want to avoid doing is moving too quickly, especially as I said earlier, in that second period. That is often the period when there is significant exploration, practice. You want to, introduce variety in that stage. So don't feel like you need to go any faster than your child is able to absorb the information. Sometimes that 3-period lesson will take place in under 5 minutes, but not always. So don't feel a time pressure. And if you're looking and a lesson seems like it should be a fast, easy lesson to you, but your child is needing to spend significant time and practicing that, don't worry. There'll be something else later on that would take another child a bit longer, and they'll pick up on that more quickly. And it is neat to see that variety of experience from child to child. Okay, another mistake that we can make in applying the 3-period lesson is not letting the child identify their own mistake. And in that, we want to, whenever possible, have the child discover their error for themselves. So not only can we go ahead and back up to a previous stage in the 3-period lesson, we can apply the Socratic method of questioning to help them discover their mistake. And one of the ways that we can do this is to ask a question for which their incorrect answer would be the correct answer. So in the case where I ask them, what is this? And point to, the 2 unit cubes, and the child says 1, I can then point to the 1 unit cube and ask, what is this? And oftentimes the child will, as they begin to think about what that is, they realize, wait a second, that's 1. So the one that I just looked at can't be 1. What was that? Oh, wait, no, that was 2. And you'll see them correcting themselves. So whenever possible, we want to have a child go ahead and correct their mistakes for themselves. Okay, respectful language. This is crucial in Montessori. We want to avoid using words like must or should, and be respectful in the way that we are interacting with our child. In that, we want to, in the carefully prepared environment, the child is getting to choose, but we're constructing the environment so that they have developmentally appropriate choices. As we're conversing, working with our child, you want to be at same level eye contact. Now, making eye contact is important. Having it at same level is crucial. Now, not all of us are going to want to be picking our child up to get them at the same eye level. That's why most Montessori educators work with kids on the floor. That enables us to be at same eye level, work with a lot of manipulatives and materials, and the child is able to move freely. So that is going to be, another tip that you'll want to use when you're implementing the 3-period lesson is making that same level eye contact, and when possible, simply working on the floor. It's very inviting, it's informal, it helps the child to feel relaxed and uninhibited in their exploration and movement. Now, the applications of the 3-period lesson, it really is across all disciplines. You can use it for new vocabulary. You can use it when you are doing object comparison. Um, some examples, grammar symbols, when you're introducing those, you want to do that with the 3-period lesson. Now, kids don't play playing cards as often as they used to. When I grew up, we played cards constantly. So there's a lot of math games that you can do with playing cards. We actually have at um, an entire activity book at math games with cards. A lot of kids need to be introduced to the deck of cards so you can use the 3-period lesson when you're explaining to them what the different suits are. When you are talking about number of syllables, number of syllables is one of those really simple, basic language arts activities in early elementary that it's surprising how many students find challenging. So when you're doing that, just remember to pull that 3-period lesson out of your back pocket. So, whether it's the water cycle, place value, or formulas for area, perimeter, volume, you can apply that 3-period lesson to all of those. And again, they are going to be, the 3-period lesson is going to be effective for all types of learners. Okay, it is crucial for a child's success in all areas of life to develop self-awareness. Um, as Dr. Montessori instructed, one test of the correctness of an educational procedure is the happiness of the child. So again, careful observation of the child in each of those 3 periods is going to prevent you from going on to the next before they're ready, frustrating them. So when your child does hit a stumbling block, you want to be able to, help them become self-aware of what's going on inside of them as well. So what are they thinking? What are they believing? What are they feeling? What are they hoping is going to happen next? And help them with their self-talk of how to approach those things as they are experiencing them. Okay, one of the questions that we utilize at the Rising Stars Foundation when we are working one-on-one with students is, what do you think of your work? In Montessori, kids are their own teachers. We're simply there as guides, and asking them this question is going to help them, do self-analysis and give a critical look at their work and help them to become self-aware of what they think of it and where do they want to go next with it. So that's a question that you can use. You want to use language that motivates. This is out of the Schiller Learning Math Curriculum Parent Guide. There are different phrases that are suggested for when different stumbling blocks come up. One of them, when your child makes a mistake, is to let them know there may be a different answer. Let's take a look at the steps that we're using to solve this, focusing on that process. And by the way, when the child is walking you through the process, that's going to help you spot where they have made an error. And again, when your child is becoming frustrated or yourself. The frustration is not reserved just to kids. Let's face it. We as home educators get frustrated sometimes too. Pivot. Just, turning to another activity or a physical break can be beneficial. Now, when your child makes a mistake and they've hit a stumbling block and they're asking for help, a great response, again, teaching with that Socratic method, teaching utilizing a question as opposed to a lecture, would be to ask the child, which part would you like my help with? And in that, the child is going to think about that in a way that they hadn't been previously and analyzing, okay, these are the parts I understand. This is the part where I'm struggling. And often, as they are either taking you through their process or describing to you what part they would like help with, they end up fixing that for themselves, self correcting. And if not, fine, no problem. We can just go back to the first step in the 3-period lesson. Okay, now there are 3 possible outcomes of a lesson. Keep these outcomes in mind as you are using the 3-period lesson. The first possible outcome is that the child achieves both competency as well as closure, and they get it, they're ready to move on. In that case, just jot down the lesson that has been completed and move on to the next. Very simple. The second possible outcome is that the child achieves competency, but not yet closure. Now, with this one, sometimes this can be a challenge as the parent to, we see that our kid gets it, and now it looks like they're just playing or wasting time. But if they're willing to take the time and make the effort to pull those materials back out, do that activity again, even if they've already mastered that skill, it simply means they've not yet gleaned every possible benefit from that. And we want to empower them to get closure at their pace. Do not worry. Kids are not shy about letting you know when they are ready to move on. Now, third possible outcome is that they don't have competency or closure. So in that case, it's easy for us as parents to say, okay, this is one of those things that's going to go in that column for lessons to be revisited. And no stress, we are not feeling held to some artificial timetable. And we are simply going to revisit that on a regular basis and empower the child to practice that skill whenever they would like. And again, often when you are at the phase of learning where you're introducing something with that 3-period lesson, the lessons that are exploring that second period are often the ones that are going to end up in that column for lessons to be revisited. Now, there is a second part to the third outcome of a lesson, and that is when the child does not achieve competency or closure and they've hit a wall. They're frustrated. Offer to move on to something else. Again, we want to just pivot. You can, and this is actually something that is in the Schiller Learning Parent Guide, is when we see the child is frustrated. I see you're not developmentally ready for this. Let's put it aside and come back to it another time. And often they're just relieved, like, oh, really? I don't, I'm not going to be forced to go through this. That's great. And they pivot to something else or absorbed, engrossed, and then you could come back to it even later that day, or, introduce it in 1 or 2 days later, again, as if for the very first time. So not showing any frustration there. Now, sometimes when you tell them, I see you're not developmentally ready for this, they say, what do you mean I'm not ready? I can do this. And now they've got that internal motivation to work through something that had a moment before been too stressful for them. But now they've got that internal motivation to climb that mountain. That is great too. But again, put that in that column for lessons to be revisited and revisit that until the child has achieved both competency and closure. So I think that you will find applying the 3-period lesson to any of your subjects, be it math, language arts, science, everything, is going to help your child maximize their potential and also be a very simple but effective gap preventer so that your child is always working with concepts and materials that they are understanding. This is the last week for the Back to Homeschool Blast conference pricing that is on the Schiller Learning website. We do for the session today, we've got a free shipping promo code for you. That is going to be, here, let me just put this in the chat for you. That's gonna, the T at 2 BTH, that's gonna give you free ground shipping on any order to the United States that is over $40. So you can go ahead and combine that with the Back to Homeschool Blast pricing. Did anyone have any questions that we didn't get to work into the session? Let's see. It looks like I got to all of those. And Schiller Learning, the curriculum kits, everything is available individually. There's a language arts kit A that's going to be your first 2 years of language arts. Generally going to be pre-K kindergarten for most kids, but it really depends on when you're starting them. Language arts kit B covers 1st through 4th grades. Math kit 1 covers pre-K, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. 5 years of hands-on math, all the materials for the entire family. There are there's another option for that, and that's the Math Kit 1 Basic. So if you already have the decimal material, your base 10 blocks, a volume of those, by the way, because we are using more than just a standard base 10 set. So there's 100 of the unit cubes, 28 tens, 28 hundreds, and then a total of 17 of the 1,000 cubes. So generally, you'll need 3 sets of a standard base 10 as well as additional 1,000 cubes. But if you have that, or you're using beautiful Montessori golden bead, then the Math Kit 1 Basic is going to be a great option for you because it's giving you all the same printed material, download access. All of the kits include downloads of all your printed material so that you can work with it with your whole family without having to purchase anything else. Fraction starts off with a basic introduction of what a fraction is and takes you through advanced fractions that they're using with pre-algebra. And Math Kit 2, that picks up where Math Kit 1 left off with 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, including pre-algebra. So when your student finishes with this, they are very well prepared for not only any Algebra 1, but high school geometry. Geometry is done throughout. Again, tomorrow, remember, we've got a live session, a STEAM project that you can learn how to lead your child in, or you can watch along with your child, or simply have your child watch, and it will be walking them through doing a paper circuits activity. That's with Josh Zimmerman of Brown Dog Gadgets at 12 Eastern. So that would be 11 Central, 10 Mountain, or 9 Pacific. Thank you again for being here with us today. And let us know how applying the 3-period lesson works for you, any challenges that you face with that. Um, I know that when I started using the Schiller Learning Math curriculum years ago, the 3-period lesson was something that I had previously struggled with. And it's incorporated into the scripted curriculum. When I was about maybe a third of the way through the first math book, I realized that I had internalized that technique and was able to easily apply it across all of our curriculum. So, maybe start just trying to work it into one of your subjects and perfect it there, get comfortable with it. With Montessori, you don't have to do it all at once. Bring in, just like when we're working with kids, we introduce maybe 3 new things at once. Start with just a few techniques and get comfortable with those, and then start adding a few more things. The Montessori method, it's beautiful. It's a natural fit for homeschooling. So let us know if you have any questions. We want to hear about those. Have a great day, guys.